will now be going straight to the panel session where we'll be discussing the making of African Moguls: hustle, breakthrough, and brand. And to moderate this session is yours truly. I would applaud myself, but my hands are busy, so help with that. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists for joining us on this panel. Like I said, this is an unfiltered event, and we want to know what your journey has been. Unfortunately, we don't have all day, but I know that we can make the most of the time that we have. So, very quickly, I'll just start with the questions, and I'll start with Folawe Omikunle. Now, you once said that you wore every hat imaginable, from cleaner to driver to secretary and then to CEO. And that's why I do not like it when people just say things like out of nowhere, because that doesn't exist. I do not believe in that. And you literally are a testament to the fact that you have put in the work and here you are. So, my question is, what was the hardest hat that you had to wear? And what did that teach you in that moment or in those moments, about building something from the ground up?
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to congratulate Fab and the entire Under 40 CEOs team for such incredible work over the last decade. Well done and congratulations. Maybe just to give some context about the organization that I used to run, which literally was from an idea. I wouldn't even say startup because I feel like startup, you still have some things in place, but literally from an idea and a vision, which was that we wanted to ensure that one day all children in Nigeria will have access to quality education. And literally that was what I had. I didn't even have a job description. And I took up this role and with a group of people and my team, built an organization that today exists in 4 states across Nigeria. And they're about to scale across the entire country, reaching millions of children. And I share that because, when I think about the question that you just asked me, I wore several hats, but then, and I was CEO. And I would say that, of course, all of those hats came with its own challenges, but the hardest was being CEO. I do not know that when I accepted to become CEO, I fully thought about, the responsibility and the reality of what that meant. I was so consumed by the vision and the purpose of this organization that was sort of where my mind was. And it shook every fiber of me and within me. And I'd say that, being CEO was the toughest, being the person carrying on the burden and the weight of vision of an organization and ensuring that every single stakeholder and member was, bought into it and sort of aligned to that was the most difficult task. Being the driver, the secretary, the accountant, all of those things, I think that taught me humility. And that taught me the importance of every single role in an organization or in a company. But being CEO taught me resilience. Waking up every single day, sometimes feeling super stretched, sometimes having to make decisions in the face of several uncertainties, self-doubt, fears, and having to make those different decisions was definitely a humbling, but also, an opportunity for me to, lie on my face, to just show up, to be consistent, to wear my big up pants. But I'd say that it was being CEO that I grew. It was being CEO that I developed muscles that I never really thought existed within me. And I'd say that was the most difficult, hat of all the hats that I wore.
So, would you say that please, a round of applause, by the way. Would you say that the higher you rose, the more difficult the challenges were? Because beliefs are that, you have to do the hardest work on the ground level. And then when you rise, you now just start flexing and, just watching movies.
No. So I think what happens is that the higher you rise, you start to build a level of confidence, there's conviction. You've seen some of those challenges before, and you sort of know that, okay, well, we've seen this before, we can go through. So you develop more confidence and trust in yourself, your team, etc., and then you're able to navigate it. But the problems and the challenges don't stop. In fact, there are times where it would feel like everything that you've built on is crumbling. and you have to start again, you have to adapt, you have to evolve, you have to pivot. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, like, so basically the way that the organization that I used to run, Teach for Nigeria, worked is that we'll recruit teachers. All of these teachers that we would, university graduates that we'll recruit as teachers for public schools, we did all our processes, most of it in person. And then COVID struck and we immediately had to pivot. Like, I mean, I think the most that we did with technology was like Zoom meetings and things like that. But like to think about recruiting our entire cohort of university graduates during the pandemic, to train them virtually, like all of those things seemed really impossible. And then the funding that you had also secured to start to engage grant makers and donors to say that, we're going to use your money differently, like thinking about all of those different dynamics. And so it was like we're building another organization. It was like it was something else that we're trying to do. But, so I share that because there are times where everything that you've built on would fall apart and would not look the same, and you would still have to make decisions in those and deal with the challenges and face those challenges. So yeah, the challenges don't stop; they keep coming. But you grow stronger muscles, and you get more confident and gain more trust in yourself. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Folawe. Please, a round of applause. Thank you for that inspiration. All right, let me come to Temitope. So, what you did basically is what Nigerians like to call jakbada, right? So, you rose through the ranks at JP Morgan, and then you left it all to return and to build here in Nigeria. My question is, what exactly gave you that clarity and that courage to kind of walk away and just decide that, going from a global career to a mission back home is what you want to do at that time?
Thank you. Um, so, to give a little bit of background, I left Nigeria to, first of all, I left Nigeria by chance. It was not completely planned. I had been admitted to study civil engineering, University of Ibadan, 1999, and we resumed, or we were supposed to resume, or I appeared, and then there was a strike. And then we thought, oh, okay, maybe it'll just be a week, 2 weeks. And then it became a month, and 2 months, and 3 months, and 4 months. Anyway, that strike ended up lasting a whole year, almost a year, that 1999 strike. Many people will remember that. Yeah. So at the turn of the year, um, at the beginning of the new year, um, my dad said, I mean, you can't just be sitting at home. Just find something to do. So doing all the, I started doing SAT, doing A level, doing just keeping busy. And then in doing all of that, I went online and started researching what schools I can go. Anyway, long story short, I got a scholarship and then ended up in the UK. And at the time, I had stayed so long at home, I just decided any course close to engineering, I'm going, and I disappeared. And then ended up staying for about 10 years. Studied and then worked. But the point I'm making is that I never intended to leave Nigeria, first of all. And from the moment I left, I knew that I was coming back, and I was coming back to do business. And so that was clear. It was only a matter of when. And so the time when I eventually did, I just got promoted. I was doing well. I just thought if I continue like this, I'm going to get so comfortable that the original mission will get lost. So I left abruptly. Literally, I just took off, packed my things in boxes, gave a friend my house key, and said, post it to Nigeria, and I was gone. Literally. And what are the things that made me make that decision at that time? So around that time, I came back in 2009. Prior to that was just Obasanjo's government, President Obasanjo's government, and they spent a lot of time coming to the UK to speak to many of us at that time. And at the time, companies in Nigeria started coming to the UK to recruit. There was careers in Africa. I had been interviewed by Shell, interviewed by Procter and Gamble. A few of my friends got all those jobs. So, everything was bullish, and I always take my decisions using a pros and cons, methodology, right? And so I sat down and looked at the pros and looked at the cons, and in my opinion, the pros outweighed the cons, and then I just took the decision that I'm gone. So let me mention some of the pros that I identified at the time. The first was just this fulfillment. I have a strong fulfillment anytime I'm doing something relating to Nigeria that I don't have while I was all the years I was doing work and doing very well in the UK by you know standards of numbers and all of that. But there was no fulfillment. I went to work every day. I got the job done. I was getting promoted, but I was not fulfilled. I was just feeling like a robot, right? I felt also like a tiny part of something that looked like a maze. It was all looking abstract. I couldn't really, I was working in JP. I couldn't really see the impact of the work that I was doing. It was not, maybe I'm that kind of person that likes to touch things. Maybe that's why I'm also in building industry because when I build something, I can see it. I appear on this place is a bush, and then I come back in a year, and then there's a 10-story building on it. I operate that way. So I couldn't feel the fulfillment in what I was doing. So I just felt like I can't continue like this. That was number one. Number two is um, I think around that time I saw the documentary The Men Who Built America. And the men who built America, speaking about Vanderbilt, Carnegie, JP Morgan, Henry Ford, their operation period was between 1850 and 1920 or thereabout. That's around 170 years plus. And I thought the America of then felt a lot like Africa of now. And so um, there's no more space for anybody to build anything in the UK or in America. But if I return to Africa, we can maybe in 100 years be categorized as the men who built Africa, right? So I was like, look, there's more impact to be made. There's more value to be added. And most importantly, when you look at the fact that I knew that I was going to do business, right? I was working and I looked at the environment, the opportunities in Africa, in Nigeria are just starting. They're all nascent. Everything is growing. I mean, we're celebrating the building of a refinery today in Nigeria is massive. When was the last refinery built in the UK? Probably 1960, 1970. It's not relevant anymore, right? We can still build 20 refineries in Nigeria today and it's still going to be beneficial. So even just looking from a pure business numbers perspective, it made all the sense to decide it's best to go to Nigeria, to Africa, and of course, Nigeria being the base, it made sense to start from here. So when I looked at all of that, and then, of course, I prayed, and I felt convicted that it was the right thing to do. It was always going to happen. It was just a matter of when. And so I took the decision then. This is 16 years. Um, Tough times, days when I said, who sent me now? Right? When I thought, let me just, I can still package myself, put my CV together and go back to the UK. And then I remember some of the reasons why I came, beyond numbers, because I think I can live a comfortable life anywhere in the world. Um, but then I look at, when I came to Nigeria, it was just me. I dusted off an existing business, yes, but it was just me in a room in my flat after living squatting with a friend for a couple of months. Just me, I was the only employee, and then we became two, and then for about 5 years we were five. And today we have about 250 people directly who are under our employment. And then by extension, because our industry is construction, then you have all the artisans and vendors probably easily from our weekly and monthly outgoings. We're taking care of about 1,000 people directly. And then by extension, their families maybe, multiply that by 4 or 5, maybe 4 or 5,000 people every month. And that, I don't think any money can give me that kind of satisfaction. And so that alone, and I would round up with a story. There was a time when I had a very, very challenging project, and it looks like everything was going to, fall apart. And, I tried everything, and I was going to throw in the towel on that project. And one day I said a prayer to God. I said, God, I can actually go anywhere and be fine. But you see, you have given me at the time maybe about 50 people in my employment. I said, if you are going to tell me to leave this project, give me somewhere else to take them to, because I do not want to sack anybody. Not because they didn't perform, but because of these challenges. And trust me, it wasn't up to a month. Everything just got resolved after I made that prayer. So every time, when it looks like I want to, give up, because Nigeria will give you that easily every week. Every week is a new one. You can't do any sort of business in Nigeria without having a tough skin. Every week you feel like somebody is saying, just pack this thing up. We'll send you a message. But when that happens, I look at some of those things and I look at when things were so tough and something just finds a way to sort it out. It's just like the story of David, if you're, a Bible student, where he said, when it was time to face Goliath, he said, there was a time that there was a lion that came and I ran after the lion and I smote it. Then a bear came. So I remind myself, okay, there was this challenge, we sorted it out. There was another one, we sorted out. Okay, this one is bigger, but again, we'll sort it out. And that's how we've been rolling for the last 16 years.
Just wow. Please, a round of applause. Thank you so much, Temitope, for that. Thank you so much. Okay, let me come to Nkem Dilim. Now, you have led FutureSoft through multiple evolutions, from web hosting, digital strategy, and now into AI transformation. This is an industry that changes so fast. So, how do you manage to stay ahead of the curve every single time?
One of the values that FutureSoft is built on as well, right, is to learn like your life depends on it. And I've, guess, made it, sort of the thing that I do to always learn. And I think when you're in technology, you know that what you know today is already outdated. So if you haven't learned anything new today, then, just give it 5 days and you're like in the last century. And I think especially with how technology has evolved, I think my generation is the generation that is very lucky to have seen technology evolve, right? So when you think about it, we witnessed the birth of the internet. We've witnessed the reduction of screens from really big to really tiny, but with so much more functionality, so much computing power. We've witnessed the birth of AI, right? And what it can do and how it's been evolving, right? And I think we're that generation that understands manual, but also understands the digital side of it, right? And will be the last generation that understands that. And I think when you know that, then you know that you have to evolve and you have to pivot. And, like Folawe and Temitope have said, in business, you're constantly faced with challenges. So you're constantly pivoting, you're constantly evolving, you're constantly reinventing yourself. And you can only do that if you have the knowledge base to actually do that. If you, have no clue, or what should I do? Okay, then you go and figure it out. And I think for me, learning is not just traditional learning. I learn from people, I learn from situations, I learn from challenges, I learn from watching other people. A lot of people say, oh, who are your mentors? And I said, oh, I have many. They just don't know that they're mentoring me because I stalk them and I watch what they say and I go to, events where they speak so that I can learn. And I think when you do that, then learning becomes second nature and you're not even really thinking about it. But that, I've coupled with being very intentional as well about the learning. So every year I pick something new that I want to learn. So there was a year when I was like, oh, I want to learn about crypto. And I dedicated 30 minutes every day to learn about crypto. And, by the time I calculated how many hours that was, it was 21 8.5-hour days in a year. There would never be a time where I have 21 8.5-hour days to actually learn about something, right? But using that method and making that learning very practical as well, right? So I was like, okay, this money is going to be my play money. I'm going to see what I'm going to do with it. I bought crypto. I, went into penny coins and was monitoring the market. I was day trading. I was doing all sorts of different things just to learn, right? Do I want to do those things on a full-time basis? No, of course not. But I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand what is the technology behind it. I wanted to understand what is the value creation behind it. I wanted to understand what are the mechanisms that drive the market. And I learned all of those things, and now I understand it, right? And I joined different communities. I invested in NFTs, and I think that attitude is, sort of what I've taken through the last, 20 years of my career.
Are you still waiting? Put your hands together. Thank you so much, Nkem Dilim. Okay, so let me come to Victor. Victor, you have a very interesting way of seeing finance because this is the first time I'm hearing that it's not just about accounting or numbers, but it's also strategy and even storytelling. I never would have thought. I mean, so my question is, can you share a moment in your career when interpreting numbers literally or in context changed the course of a decision or the course of a deal?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that question. I think numbers have always been my thing, right? So growing up primary school, you do math, you do all of the sciences, and it kind of stuck. So sometimes I can actually picture the numbers in my head. Now, from an engineering background, I recall my first real exposure to business was when I did my internship in Shell. And I spent 6 months, and naturally I'm restless. So 2 months in, I set off in production planning, and after 2 months, I looked at my boss. I said, "I'm sorry, but is there more to this thing?" And he says, "Okay, well, I guess this department is slow. If you want something exciting, maybe you want to go to the field." By the way, I was in Warri at the time, so I opted to join pipelines, and then I moved. No, I went to maintenance first. So we then went. I was assigned to a team, and then we went to the couple of facilities under what was then called A team. So the way Shell was set up, we had west and east. So I was in the east, which is I was in west, Warri, and then in Warri they had three teams. So I was in A team, and then A team had control over Ugeli and the environs. So I joined this team and then went to the field, and then they will tell me, "Look, you're peripheral staff. You don't have insurance cover, so you can't go into the facilities in case something goes wrong." And I was wondering, wow, are you predicting bad? Little did I know. So within, I think the first 3 days, by day four, some of the youth in the community came to the facility at Utorogo and shut it down, closed the flare line, and blew up that facility. There was no telephone lines at the time to call home. My folks were worried. Now, Utorogo supplies gas into Egbe. So it meant that thing happened. I knew there would be an outage in Lagos. So I began to think, okay, so how does this thing really work? So I asked my boss, this facility has been blown up. How much is it going to cost to replace it? So each pressure vessel was a $25,000 investment, and the two that had been blown up. And then the flare line, of course, and then, of course, the spill around the community. So the rivulets, the farms were all littered with oil. So I sat down, I started asking myself, why would they blow up this thing? What was the root cause? Oh, you heard that the contracts are awarded at a certain price, but then the actual price was different. Okay, you didn't give us this, you didn't give us safety boots, you didn't give us hard hats. And I'm like, is that all there is? Although to be fair, I recall when driving through all of those communities, about 7 of them surrounding Utorogo, and all of them with the Christmas tree pipelines connecting gas, Utorogo processed and shipped through the Alps, Escravos Lagos pipeline system. Otu Jeremiah Kakpamri, Olomoro, Ole, like that. You keep driving around. The only visible, tangible presence or indication that there was any form of governance was the facilities Shell built. The local school, local hospital, the roads. Nothing else showed that there was any form of governance, federal, state, or local. I then understood deprivation, understood the lack, and what informed the decisions and actions happening. So after that 2 months of going there, coming back, they'll lock the facility. Okay, can't release this guy. Then my boss negotiates. Engineer Chris Benyon go, okay, release this one. Now he's a student. He's just doing internship. Okay, how much you go pay? 5K. Then he gave the boys 5K. They let me out of the flow station. So that experience made me realize that okay, Nigeria is different. So you sit in Lagos, what's happening in the oil fields is different. So after 2 months doing that maintenance, I then moved to pipelines. I said, okay, let me go and do something else. Again, boredom. Finished that 6 months, came back to Lagos. Final year, I began to ask myself, do I want to do this engineering of a thing itself, Because I looked around. Of course, this is 2001. So it was telecoms, nascent. So there was opportunities in telecoms. There was oil and gas, traditional. But then beyond those two, what else is there? Road construction. I said, okay, what else can I do with this, my penchant for numbers? So I spoke to a couple of my mentors at the time, one of whom was my dad's close friend. And I'd also watched my dad run his business, first class engineering graduate, he's built his own business and he's fairly successful. But I said, this guy could have been so much more if he had something. What is that something? I thought it was finance, knowledge of business, being able to interpret numbers and make sense of it. So when I spoke with the gentleman, Engineer Kuri, he said, look, maybe you want to go and start in management consulting because they will teach you how to take businesses, interpret it, and make sense of it, and to scale. So I said, okay, where can I do that? He said, well, look for the big four. I said, okay, who is big four? So it's your PwC, it's your KPMG. Of course, as an engineer, you didn't have exposure to all of that stuff. So I quickly researched and then I started applying to them. Fortunately, PwC was the fastest. So I did one test, one interview, and I got in. KPMG had like 5 or 6 interviews. I said, these guys are not serious. Why am I speaking all this English? So I joined PwC. And I remember during the interview, they asked me, why are you here? I said, well, this is the story. I want to learn about numbers and how to make sense of it, but how they impact business. And he said, okay, but normally you start in audit. I said, if you give me audit, I'll walk. I'll just go back to, because audit for me is looking back. I want to look forward. What can I do here that looks forward? He said, okay, we'll put you in advisory. You do corporate finance. So corporate finance are businesses that are essentially how businesses finance growth. So they're looking forward, they look at plans and then they build. I said, okay, that sounds like what I want to do. And I said, oh, by the way, I only want to do 3 years here. And he said, what are you don't want to be partner? I said, I don't have any such interest. What do you want to do after that? So if I do 3 years here, then I want to go into investment banking and then do maybe another 3 or 4 years and then go to private equity. And he said, you seem to have it all figured out. I said, well, I think I do, but I need guidance. So the good thing about the PwC environment was it provided a platform. First, a safety of guidance. So the system was deliberately structured such that you had counselors and you had coaches at every stage of the way who would tell you, okay, this is what you should think about, this is what you should think about professionally in your life, settling down, location, getting place. So they will always typically hold your hand and direct you. So that for me was fantastic. Now, the one big project for me that stuck out was the final thing I did at PwC before I left for AfriInvest. It was a project that was conceptualized by Kimbel Osagi. It was a project in Abuja that essentially birthed the Jabi Mall. Now, it was a mixed-use development. It was going to cost $1 billion, and this was 2006. And he had hired us at PwC to build the business plan. First, a feasibility study before the business plan. And of course, in doing that feasibility study, the question is, what is the size of the market? This investment of $1 billion, how are you going to return it? Mixed-use development, some of it is residential, some commercial, some business, and there's a mall. What does the mall do? It's supposed to attract products from the local markets, ideally. So you shouldn't depend too much on imports. Now, which markets are you serving? Agriculture, handcrafts, some local manufacturing. Through that journey, looking through the numbers and trying to tell a story, because the idea was to take that plan and go and raise money, I began to wonder. Now, in PwC, my job was really you take the financial model and you build it in Excel. So you take the assumptions, you build out something that makes sense, and then you stress it for real life scenarios. Does this thing hold? But the challenge is when you build stuff in Excel is you sit down here today and you try and project 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line. Now that model went 15 years out. And I kept asking myself, what would happen if these assumptions change in this way over 15 years? Can you accurately predict what will play out? That's one part of it. And then you take your assumptions stress it, and then you have to now go and sell a story to people who will write you a check and say, okay, you know what, take this cash and go and burn it. Hopefully, you return my money back to me 2 or 3x or 5x, whenever it is. Now, as a young guy sitting there with many seniors, I had to start thinking, okay, how do you tell a story that is convincing to the guy who has capacity to write you a check that, look, one, I'm the right person to back. Two, this idea is the right idea to back. Three, that this idea would actually scale it to deliver the promise. So it was in that you began to look at financial accounts and say, okay, how do these things make sense? So there's history, there's projections, there's a forecast. Do these forecasts tell a story? What story does it tell? Is it believable? The market you're looking to get into, is there real value there or is it all hype? Now, of course, 2006, like Tosin mentioned, it was all of that Obasanjo years when it was, everything was all sort of pro-growth, Africa rising narrative. A lot of Nigerians were returning home, so everything was bullish. Fortunately, we got the interest of the Mubadala group out of the UAE, who decided they were going to bankroll that entire project 100%. And then that struck me. I said, okay, so who secured this deal? That was my first interface with Afrinvest because they were on the fundraising side, essentially. And I met with CEO, thought he was charismatic, and I crossed over. Now, again, remember I said 3 years in, then I'll do investment banking. So that for me was the right segue because that was just on the cusp of my third year in PwC. So I just made that transition. And for me, it was going from writing business plans and doing feasibility studies to actually now working with people who had projects to raise the monies for them to execute on those projects. And some of the deals I met in Afrinvest just as I joined were very interesting stories. 2005 banking consolidation, banks had raised money, some mergers had happened. 2007, my current group CEO, at the time was DMD, was deputy to Godwin, had said to Godwin, let's go and pitch to GT Bank. Rather than play around this small pond, let them go and raise money internationally. So they pitched the idea of going to London to the late Tayo and Fola, who were both running GT at the time, and said, guys, these guys, elevate your game. Let's go to London and go and raise money in London for you. Give you a dollar balance sheet so that you can now play in the big leagues. And then we went in there looking to raise, I think, $325 million, ended up raising 525, no, 350, raised 525. And then a year after, then did the GDR, which essentially listed them in London. And then from 750, raised $825 million. So within 2 years, GT had over $1 billion to play with. That transition is what separated GTB till today, distinguishing it. So that's another story again that for me shows the impact and transformation.
Wow, please a round of applause. Thank you so much. Okay, so because of our time, I'm going to ask one final general question. We each have 30 seconds to try and answer the question. So I think it's interesting to see how your journeys have been so far, and it's also very, very impactful. I think the last question I'm going to ask is, looking back, what personal value or mindset has helped you push through these transitions? Because you all have at one point in your business or in your lives had to transition, navigating unexpected turns and shifting industries and things like that. So looking back, what personal values would you say or mindsets would you say that has helped you push through these transitions, and how has it shaped the kind of leader that you are today? Starting with you.
Thank you very much. I will go with the mindset that has shaped who I've become today. And I think that mindset is also what got me to even accepting to becoming the CEO of an organization that was just an idea at an age where, I was completely inexperienced, never ran an organization before. And it's the why. And I think a lot of people, whether some people say it's your why, or it's your vision, or it's the purpose, but it's really, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's, what are you trying to solve for? What are you, and I think that mindset, like putting the why, putting the vision, the purpose above any circumstances, because seasons will change, the organization will evolve, you need to adapt, but like that vision and that why will never change. Please, I'm going to share a story. I can say sorry, but like, I think about a decision that we needed to take for the organization, that I needed to take I was faced with and you not having enough funding at the point, but also had a really enticing multi-year investor and investment that could have taken us, 5 years ahead in the business. But like this organization was asking me to do something that was completely, against the vision that I was working. I was trying to raise and develop, critical minded students and children for Nigeria, and then you're asking me to teach the values of your own country through your funding. And I rejected that funding. There were some of my stakeholders and board members who thought I'd made the wrong decision. But I shared this because I think it's so important to know what it is that you're doing and to really, really be anchored in that vision. And I'd say that mindset is also what has shaped me today. The clarity that I have, the sense of purpose that I have in doing and working with the organizations that I'm working with or individuals is still sort of driven by a strong vision. What, why, what exactly am I trying to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Folawe. Okay, Temitope.
Very, very similar. Um, what wakes you up and what keeps you going in the against all odds is the impact. I think you just come to a point where everything else doesn't matter. It's just about the impact and where you see the vision that you have beyond. So for me, the vision of building businesses and growing and all of that is about uh, taking people out of poverty by extension, right? Because if you build businesses and people are able to do business with your business, they earn a living. People are able to get employment, they earn a living. Eventually, everything trickles down. So when you look at that, that wakes you up every morning. And that keeps you going every day, even when there are challenges all around you. So, yes, of course, there's the persistence, there's the drive, but that vision keeps you anchored and it doesn't allow you to get too distracted or deviated against all odds with challenges and everything. The vision must be clear to you, must be so clear to you that when everything else pales, you just remember the vision and it keeps you going the next day. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Temitope. All right, Nkemdili.
Yeah, I think for me it's very, very similar as well. It's the why. Why are you doing this? And I think that why is deeply steeped in impact, deeply steeped in wanting to make a difference. And like Temitope said earlier, right? This is a virgin playing field. There's so much impact, so many opportunities. And I think for me it's always been, if not me, then who? Right? And I think the second thing that I realized as well is that once you have your purpose and you know that you're walking in your purpose, everything else will fall into place. And all you need in addition to understanding your purpose is courage, being able to do it afraid, being able to say yes even if you don't know how, right? And I think as entrepreneurs we do that all the time. We're like, yes, I can do that. And then you go figure out how, right? The other one I think is consistency. When you've been in the game for as long as all of us, you know that there are not many people who are consistent. And you know that putting in that effort and just doing it every single day, come rain, come shine, things are falling apart, things are great, you're still doing it, right? You never rest on your success. You never get, put down by the challenges. I think that is, sort of really, really important. And I think the last part is just hard work. There are no shortcuts. There's no like, oh, okay, I can do it like this. And somehow, you need to do excellent work every single day and you need to work hard and you need to put in the work in order to get the results. If not, it's just not going to work. So I think those different, intertwining of those things is, and then obviously learning is like the foundation of all of it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Indeed, you never stop learning. Okay, Victor.
Yeah, at the risk of sound like a broken record.
Let me guess,
It's
it's the
almost
why.
echoing everyone. Um, for me, it's a couple of values. Again, it resonates very much with what Didi said and Nkem rather. Um, I look at it as one, the compounding impact of investing time into doing stuff. Um, First, there's learning, the education. That's why I'm always moved by the work someone like Falawe does. Education for me is critical. I think is one area that as a country we have perhaps the biggest calling. I'm fortunate my mom was a teacher, so coming from that background, I understood the impact of education, so it's important. Um, I know today we hear things like education is a scam. That's one of the most tragic things I read on social media today because a lot of our young people underestimate the importance of education. It provides you a foundation to build anything, no matter how long it is. Um, Investing time consistently, it compounds. Um, Clarity of vision, purpose, knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Um, Tim Toke spoke about how he moved abroad accidentally, but then returned because he understood that look, there's a time and there's a season. Um, I also watched that series, Built America. For me, it also struck me that when you look at Nigeria, you look at Africa and its position, you realize that look, this is where the real opportunities are. It requires courage. We haven't figured it out, to be honest. Um, the political economy remains, chaotic, but in the midst of chaos, you can find direction and just remain consistent, and then you begin to create. I remember in my metallurgical courses, we have this thing called metal forming and then dendrites. You just put a little seed of nucleuses everywhere, and then the thing would eventually begin to crystallize and form around those small pockets that look microscopic. They are very insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but those sites are where things begin to cluster around and begin to form. And then over years and years of consistent engagement and hard work, you will get there. There are no shortcuts. It's one of the things I tell a lot of my younger friends and colleagues. Say, guys, look, consistency, process. There's I heard this joke once. Guy says, look, you can't give 9 women, you can't get 9 women pregnant and hope that they give birth in 1 month each. It's a 9-month process. You can't shortcut that process. So just be patient, be committed. With time, you begin to see the impact of that compounded investment, play through.
Thank you so much. All right. It's been a very insightful session. And if there's one thing that resonates in everything that they've said is the hurdles will definitely come. There's no industry, there's no business without its own challenges. All you need to do is learn to ride the wave. Ladies and gentlemen, please, another round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. It's been so insightful. Thank you so much to Folawe Omikunle Nkemdilim Uwaje Bego, Temitope Rinsewe, Victor Undukoba.